Hello again, and welcome to State of Mind Talks, the podcast series from the mental health and fitness charity State of Mind Sport. This series focuses on a demanding profession which at the very top level combines elite fitness, instant decision-making, immense knowledge, composure, management, and a huge amount of mental toughness. I'm George Riley, and this is State of Mind Talks Referees. This week's guest is the man in charge, a former elite rugby league referee himself who went over to the Premier League to have a go at getting VAR working there, and he's now back with us as head of match officials. Phil Bentham, great to have you with us. How are you, first of all, and how are the first weeks and months of your new gig?
Cheers, George. It's great. It's great to be back involved in rugby league and bringing quite a bit of learning from football as well. So yeah, it's been good. The RFL's changed quite a lot since I left. So getting my feet under the table there and kind of looking at how we can improve things. It was unfortunate because the recruitment, I only got the job 2 days before the season started. So I didn't get a pre-season, which would have been nice. But yeah, we've worked really well. Got ourselves in a position now where we're obviously mid-season and looking forward to working towards the playoffs.
Yeah, that timing just before the season. I mean, was this something you were hoping to get back into, or was it something that just came up? Were you looking to get out of football and back into rugby league?
No, not at all. The job was advertised. It went out as an open application. So the temptation was too much, really. The opportunity. It's probably once in a lifetime opportunity, really, to head up the match officials. I'm thinking if somebody else had taken the role and it comes up again 6-7 years later, I would have probably been ready to retire by that time. So this was my one chance to make the decision and come back and do this role.
So day to day, what's your job spec, if you like? What are you? I guess what are you doing? Would be the simple way of asking that.
I mean, it's a really broad role. So it's basically right from recruitment course, right to making international appointments. So, we've got the full structure to work on. So day to day, a lot of it is consumed with reviewing matches, watching all the games at weekends, knowing the ins and outs of the refereeing performances, and then putting something together on a Monday with the coaching staff to make sure that we've got something beneficial in terms of coaching session for the referees. And very much of that is us talking through incidents so they've got a consistency moving forward. So that's what we try and pull together as a team on a Monday and a Tuesday, and we delivered that to the referees on a Tuesday afternoon. Other than that, I've obviously got to speak to clubs and coaches with regards to referee decisions and explanations around that, as well as working on the pathway and structure for all our officials who are just starting out and want to be the Super League referees or the Super League officials of the future.
Just one more on that before we get on to, I mean, it's all linked really. I want to talk about referee abuse and the mental health side of it and share some of your experiences and some of your feedback in your new role. But listening to what you're saying there, what you have to do, it seems to go hand in hand. I'm interested in the coaching of the referees, the reviews, and what that actually, without betraying any confidence, is what that actually looks like, because a lot of the abuse that comes from fans tends to be, and it's quite lazy, tends to be these referees aren't accountable. Yeah. With the inference being therefore it's fine to just abuse them as everyone, but there's no accountability, which to me is bonkers, because we know there is. It's not done on the internet for strangers. It's done with you and your colleagues behind closed doors. But I just wonder what that looks like in real terms.
I think that's right. Certainly since the inception of full-time referees, which was in 2006, we started this process then of being full-time and having the time to look at games and to review games properly and to work together for the consistency reasons. So in terms of an individual referee on a weekly basis, they will look at the two teams that they're preparing for that week. They'll look at some of the traits of those teams. Are there any particular things that those teams do? Do they kick early in the tackle count? Have they got a player that's capable of a 40-20? All things that would kind of drive our positioning. Are they four drives and a kick? In other words, does the referee need to stay around the ruck area? Did they push on the 10 metres? Will the referee need to go out and hold that team on the 10? Or, looking at the markers, are they tending to split early? So we get quite a lot of knowledge of the teams before we go in, just to try and help the referee, but making sure he doesn't prejudge the game. He's got to wait and see what the game gives him, but just having a little bit of knowledge of how those teams play just gives him an idea of, where he might want to be and which players he might want to be next to in the line, for example. So that's the preparation side of it. And then obviously the physical preparation, the lads have got to be super fit, to get around the field for 80 minutes. There's no interchanges when you're a referee, you're on there for 80. So we'll obviously work on the physical preparation in the week. In terms of the review process, we get to post-game and each referee will review their game minute by minute, decision by decision. And then what I want them to do then is to break that down into what are the key match decisions, what are the things that really influence this game, a decision that could be correct or a decision that they may have got wrong. They're the key match decisions. So I want them to identify those. And then I want them to tell me the story of the game. So what work have you done with Team A in the ruck area? What work have you done with Team B in the ruck area in terms of communication to the players? What have you done on the 10 metres? Were one team really pushing you and you had to work really hard? So they'd listen back to how they spoke to the players as whether that was relevant or not to the situation. So there's a lot of detail in that. And in the background, we also have a reviewer who does exactly the same from a coaching perspective. So our panel, we've got James Childy and Smith, Gareth Hewer, Matthew Thomason, Julian King, are our current panel of reviewers. They look at games and feedback to the referees on a one-to-one basis. But we always wait for the referees' review first, just to see what their thoughts are, and then we can kind of gauge our coaching towards that. Obviously, with myself having an overview on every performance.
So it's very, very forensic. I mean, I think quite a few people will be surprised by how forensic it is. And I can't think of many professions, actually, where you have a forensic weekly rip apart of the job that you have done the week before. So actually, the claim that, well, referees aren't accountable, they make these mistakes and then they're back refereeing straight away, that's nonsense, isn't it?
It is really, because what we do then is, we have a meeting where we sit down and then we have to look at the appointments for the following week. So we have to make those appointments and we have to put the referees who are in form on the games that we think are suitable for those referees. We also have to decide does somebody need a week in championship to work on something, which is not disrespecting the championship, but the pace of the game is a little bit different. Have we got a game in Super League that's perhaps good for one of our rookie referees that, might be a game for them to go and referee? So we look at that each and every week. So they're all accountable. Every single week, they're all wondering, am I in Super League this week or am I not? So, that level of accountability happens week in, week out.
So, and a big part of your job after you've done that, well, I don't know what order you do it is if you are having to have a frank discussion with a referee and maybe, for a want of a better word, demote them, you will also, when you probably turn your phone back on, have a call from that club or that coach who was in that match subject to potentially that decision that you've been talking about.
Yeah.
Demanding you, Phil, what are you going to do about this guy? This guy's not good enough. You must get that all the time. So how do you handle that?
To be fair, the coaches haven't been like that at all.
Right.
There's some, obviously, at times they're annoyed with decisions. They want explanations for decisions. But I haven't had a single person yet say, we don't want that referee or what's going to happen to him after that mistake, because ultimately that's my decision. If a top player makes, a howler in a game and they lose the game, that coach decides whether or not they're going to play them the week after. And it's the same for me. It's got to be right for our squad, and our performance the week after. We don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot because of one mistake. But there has to be accountability. People are totally right. There has to be that, and there is accountability.
So the point there, I mentioned right at the top, the social media reaction. your job's dealing with against your stakeholders are the referees, the clubs, the coaches, whatever. The thing you can't control is the rest of it. As Chris Kendall called it in his episode, the cesspit that is social media now. And the referees are on there and they see it. So as part of your management of the referees, are you all right? And if you're not all right, do you really want to be on those platforms when you're reading some of that stuff that's being written about?
Yeah. Obviously, I'm a different generation to the referees. So from my point of view, when I was refereeing and social media came in, I didn't go on it. I didn't have any accounts at all. I use LinkedIn now, but that's the only one that I use. Where Chris made a really good point is that he has a right as a human being to be on social media. That's the way that the generation speak to each other, converse. He has a right to be on there without being abused. He doesn't have to give in to the keyboard warriors, I think he said, which is 100% right. Personally, I wouldn't be on there, but they have every right to be on there, and they have every right to be protected by us. And at the moment, we're looking at a couple of companies that can add a little bit of social protection for us. So we're looking at that now to see whether or not we can integrate that into what we do. But they do know, we are here on a one-to-one basis every single week to make sure that they're okay and that things haven't gone too far and affecting family and different things.
So what kind of companies, what social media companies is it that you're
the companies that can kind of detect
right, okay, I got you,
yeah, abuse and different things, and that they would then flag that up to hopefully avoid people having to look at it or whatever. So we're just getting into that at the moment. It's something new.
Because the bottom line is, and if Chris and Liam and the other Marcus and the other referees want to be on there, that's up to them. But they have to be able to take the abuse, because right or wrong, it isn't going to stop. And no. I think the reason I feel so passionately about it is because I've been subject to the same thing myself, right. and it's horrible, and that's why it really gets me. How dare a stranger who knows absolutely nothing about the individual or the story that they're talking about just go on and type something and think that that's it. There's no accountability, and then have the audacity to talk about accountability to referees when they're typing something with zero accountability themselves and think that's it.
Yeah, it's totally right. And, the platforms are there for people to have an opinion on a decision. We haven't got a problem with that. We're supporters in matches. If I watch football, I have opinions on decisions, made by the referees. But what I don't do is I don't go on social media and talk about them. And I certainly don't go on and abuse people because they've made a certain decision. And, it's drawing the line, isn't it? A fan come to me at weekend and just basically said, "There's no wonder your referees get abused with the state of some of the decisions." And it's like, I'm thinking, you're thinking about it completely the wrong way around.
Yeah.
And then conversely, I had other fans come to me and just say, "Look, we used to criticise you when you were refereeing, but some of the abuse we saw last year for some of your group, we thought it was terrible, and we would never go to those lengths. We'll shout at a game." About a decision, which is fine. That's what it's all about, isn't it?
It's almost, well, that's what you pay your money for in a way. If you're paying 20 quid to watch your team, part of that is let off a bit of steam, but then you park it.
Exactly right. And knowing when to park it, isn't it?
And you realise it's real life. I made a decision at the weekend because Chris was getting a lot of grief from fans of my team, Leeds, because that was the game he refereed. Yeah. And I was reading it open mouths. Obviously, I've got an investment because I'm doing this podcast series, and I'm a Leeds boy. But I was reading some of this stuff, which was clearly written after having had a few drinks on a Saturday night. And I'm thinking, the reason Leeds as a club is in a mess is not Chris Kendall. So why are you going online? And there was tons of it, and I'd made a decision to call it out, and then I started getting abused, and then I realised, well, this is just how it is. This is just how it is. For whatever reason, this is where we are.
It is, and
as Rob Hicks said, as a society, it's not just rugby.
No, that's right. That's right. And unfortunately, sometimes the people that call them out are the people that get it as bad. So it's difficult, isn't it? Because you want to perhaps defend the things that are right, but sometimes it's probably better just staying quiet.
Yeah. What's the culture like between the referees? I've got a sense it's really good. I got that kind of friendly rivalry with Chris and with Liam and the other referees, all being friends, all being supportive of each other.
Yeah.
But also all going, you had some great experience yourself of grand finals, Challenge Cup finals, internationals. There aren't many of them to go round, and you're all going for the same things. So what's that dynamic like between your members of staff?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. Kind of this stage of the season, it's okay, and as we get more towards kind of the playoffs, grand finals, internationals, obviously each person then is trying to put themselves in position for those big games. But what my job is to make sure that all the stuff that we do is for the benefit of the group. Everything has got to benefit us and try and improve us as a group of referees. We can't be backstabbing each other to get the big game, because you don't want to be the best of a bad group. You want to be the best of a good group. And that's the culture that we've got at the moment. I'm just going to see how that unfolds as we get nearer the big games. It was great during the Challenge Cup semi-final period. We had no issues, so we'll be close on that. But generally, they've been really, really supportive of each other, and basically looking to try and be as consistent as possible as a group.
Let's talk about you for a few minutes. I'm interested in the football stuff, but in terms of refereeing, you've spent, I guess, more than most of your adult life in refereeing. Why refereeing? Why did you opt into such an unforgiving profession, Phil?
Yeah, I think it was. Really, I always played different sports when I was young. I didn't excel at anything, and I always watched rugby league with my parents. And I think I was probably 26 at the time, just watching Lee. That was my local club, and I was probably just having a go at the ref about a decision, and my dad just challenged me and just said, because my dad never ever mentions the referees ever, even when I was younger, he never mentioned them before I was involved, and he just challenged me and said, well, if you can do better, why don't you go and have a go? And that's where it came from. And I went and joined the local society and I got a game, and somebody said, oh, you look like you know what you're doing, and we went from there.
And you went on to have a very good career. How did you find it when you were refereeing? I was actually reminded when I was researching for this podcast, you had a couple of bad injuries, didn't you? Or at least one very bad injury refereeing, which is something we've not actually talked about on this series so far. Referees get bad injuries too.
Yeah, I mean, not many referees do. I think it was just me.
Just you.
I'm got 2 years, so managed to break my leg at Wigan, and then got hit by a player. That ended up being my last game because of that contact, because there was a knock to the back of the neck, which was felt too risky to go back on field afterwards. But they were the hardest times actually, coming back from the injuries. Same as a player, you're wondering. I think when I broke my leg, I was 40. So you're thinking, like, can I get back from this to be able to run, well enough to be on that field with these elite athletes? But fortunately, we had a really good S&C trainer who just went the whole way with me for 9 months to get me back on field. So that was great, but it's challenging. Yeah, it was challenging.
Yeah, that must have been a very, very difficult occasion. You alluded to it there. I was going to ask you about your mental health while you were refereeing. That sounds like it's probably the toughest moment. But one question I asked to Rob Hicks was how aware was he of his mental health while he was a referee? Bearing in mind, I think how aware you do have to be of your mental health as a referee. And he said not as much as he is now. How aware were you when you were refereeing of keeping yourself healthy upstairs?
I would agree with Robert. It wasn't something that really occurred to me at the time. I can remember periods where I just could not get a decent performance out of myself, and you start doubting whether you're good enough or not. And I got some advice, which was to go back and watch one of my best games from the previous season and just look at the body language between that game and the game that had just been on that weekend was vastly different. And so that was a start of where you start thinking, well, I need to look at myself here. I'm actually killing myself with the way that I'm going out on the field, worrying about things rather than just going doing what I know I can do. But in terms of mental health, it wasn't at the forefront. I'll be totally honest with you. And looking back now, there were probably some, fairly difficult moments during a career. I think the hardest really was when you thought you're performing well and you didn't get the big game, because that was out of your control. You could perform really well, but somebody else makes the decision, and it's now me making that decision. So I've got to be aware of some of the guys who've put in a year's worth of work and don't get what they want at the end of the season in terms of the grand final or internationals. I've got to make sure those messages are delivered correctly and the guys are okay afterwards.
Are there many instances on that as well where a referee will think he's had a pretty good game and then come into his review with you and you listen to his review like you said you do first, and they said, yeah, I think on the whole I did quite well, Phil, and then your review is completely different. You think, actually, I thought you made some shockers today. And what are those occasions like? Because they must be pretty brutal conversations too.
They are, and that's where you bring in kind of all your coaching, mentoring, training, is how to deliver that message. So the delivery of that message is the actual key bit of it, to make sure that there's something positive that comes from that. And hopefully that they can improve the way that they look at their games going forward. Because some of the referees will look at a game and think it's really good, where if they were watching perhaps another referee, it might not have been as good. So that level of honesty within the reviews is really important. That they look, and because you learn by looking at your own game and finding your own improvements. That's the best way to learn, rather than somebody having to tell you what they are. So again, that's something we're working on, which is the honesty within their own reviews, rather than protecting the decision, is having a look at it and saying, well, do you know what? If I'd have been in this position, or if I'd have made that decision, it would have been a better outcome for us. So again, that's all work that we're working on with the referees.
So referees' performance reviews around what they've done in games will affect, their progress, where they might be the following week. Do you ever leave referees out if you think that their mental health isn't right at that moment? And I don't mean that in any disrespect at all, obviously. And it might be that a referee comes to you and says, I'm struggling a little bit at the moment. Have there been any instances of, actually, you just need a week or two away from this, nothing to do with your performance, but you need to get your head right?
Yeah, I haven't in the time that I've been here, which is 23 rounds. But I know that's happened in the past, where people have, they've just needed a break, whether that be a personal reason or whether it be a professional reason, that, they need a week off from being, around the game. Because the guys as well, they come off the field and then they've got to double up, so they're then in the video making those really tough decisions, perhaps the day after. So there's not always just one game for them to focus on. A lot of them have two games, and sometimes just to have a weekend away, which is something I'm really keen on, that they can come to me at any point and say, look, I need some time off. I need to go to the lakes for the weekend, or just be away from rugby league. And if that's the case, that's fine. I'd rather be honest than go out on the field and not be 100%. So we do work like that with the referees, just to make sure that they're as ready as they can be each week.
Just picking up on something you said about the struggles in your career, and it was related to a bad run of form, I guess. A player will have a bad run of form. A striker in football might go 6 or 7 games without a goal, and you can almost see it in himself when he gets a chance in front of goal. Yeah. Why do referees hit good and bad form, and how? Do you understand what I mean? I'm trying to work out how that happens.
It's difficult, isn't it?
In an athlete, you can see that. If you're a halfback with the ball in your hand and you're low on confidence, you might throw a bad pass. You might make a wrong call. I'm trying to think how that manifests itself as an official. How would you, Phil, tell if a referee's in bad form or good form?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, ultimately, it comes down to our assessment of the decision making, because that's what the job's about. But there's a lot of factors go into the decision making, and sometimes you can just hit on a really, really difficult run of where you just get calls that are so difficult, and they knock your confidence a little bit, and then you watch the referee and he's looking all the time at the side to get assistance off the touch judge for a call that he should be making himself. And another one would be, somebody needlessly going to the video ref time after time because they've not got that level of confidence just to point and give the try. So there's loads of things you can see, perhaps the positioning's out, so that the missing calls because they're not getting in position. So is there something physical? Has somebody got a bit of a niggle that we don't know about? So there's lots of different things that we look at in the performances. But from my own point of view, when I was doing it, it was just that sense that I'm almost thinking I can't get a call right here. I can't. No matter what I do, I keep just making mistakes on the big stuff. We all can make mistakes on miss a ball steal or a knock on, which is not great. But when you're getting the big stuff wrong, and then the week after you get another big one wrong, it's like you need to go back to your basics. And where did you start with your refereeing? Well, you were a confident individual that went out on the field because you knew what you were doing, you know your job, and just making sure that you try and apply that positive attitude to what you're doing. But it is difficult at times.
And when you're in that mindset, does it almost fill you with dread when you send a decision upstairs and then you're waiting for it to come on the big screen and you're thinking, oh my word, I hope I've got this right because I can't get another one wrong here?
I know. Well, the worst ones were I used to give them, trying to be Mr. Confident, and then you walk back for the conversion and look up and the guy's dropped it and you give him a try. And you're thinking, well, I was trying to be confident and just give it, but that's the one that I should have sent up. It's almost like I can't catch a break here because I've been the confident decision maker, but I've done it on the wrong one. And you go through periods like that, which is like you alluded to, a football striker who, no matter what he does, he hits the post, he hits the bar, he hits it straight at the goalkeeper. He can't score for 7 weeks, and we do get on a similar run sometimes, unfortunately, as officials.
As we mentioned football, I'm conscious we've raced through time as well. Barely mentioned your last job working with the Premier League and VARs. I want to hear a little bit, as much as you can summarise about that. What was that like? What were you doing? How did it come about?
Well, it was good actually because it was a very specialist role in that they'd listen to rugby league and the way that the video ref is live on TV. And what they wanted was their VARs to be explaining decisions like we do in rugby league. So they asked me if I would go and work specifically on the communication of the VARs. So how did they work with their assistant VAR? Because they have two. So that communication has to be really, really disciplined, as you can imagine. So how does that communication work? And then how do you communicate the decision on the recording? Because obviously they don't go out live, but it is recorded and then played out. I don't know if you've seen Howard Webb's show where they play out the audio. Just making sure that they're explaining decisions so that the average person can understand why the decision's been made. You might disagree with it, but you understand the rationale of the VAR. And that was my role. So week in, week out, listening to 10 Premier League games and feeding back to the VARs on how they could potentially improve their communication.
So why do you think, and I'm sure you'll have to be careful about how you answer this, given the success, which I think was success and has been success with the video introduction and trailblazing introduction of video footage and refereeing in rugby league, with you involved in that introduction in Premier League football, why do you think there's been such a big backlash? Why do you think so many things have gone wrong with it?
I think quite a lot of it is it's very, very difficult. It's a very difficult sport. They don't have as many factual decisions as we do in rugby. So in rugby league, for example, a grounding, you can look at it and probably 8 times out of 10, you can say, okay, the bloke's grounded it. It's a fact. We've not got a problem with that. Is his foot in touch? We can see sometimes they get very close, don't we? Have to judge whether there's green between the boot and the white line. But in football, when you're subjectively deciding on has a player been fouled and has that caused him to fall over, it becomes more controversial. And then you add to that the game is low scoring, so every single decision matters. At rugby league, we might get a decision at 30-0 that the video ref might get wrong, but it doesn't affect the outcome of the game. Where at football, we all know at 3-0, if the video ref then doesn't award the team on nil to a penalty, then they would just argue, well, it would have been 3-1. It would have been a different game. So the low scoring aspect of it makes it very difficult as well. And obviously the scrutiny, the amount of scrutiny that's on those decisions. The number of times I've listened to, you can put one TV on Sky and one on BBC, and you've got two ex-players talking about the same decision, and they've both got completely the opposite view, but then the outcome is we need ex-players as VARs. Well, which player are you going to take? Are you going to take the player off BBC? Or are you going to take the player off Sky? Because they've both got a different view on it.
Yeah.
So, the subjective, difficult decisions, and don't get me wrong, some of the decisions have been poor, as they are in any sport, but certainly not to the level that the media build it to.
And that's a really good point on perspective as well. That's something Rob Hicks said when we were discussing the issues and the fan abuse. And, he said, let's see the bigger picture here. Look what's just happened with the attempted assassination in America and all these things. We're not actually in a bad spot. And that's actually, I'm guessing, what we're talking about with some of the grief our referees get, the scrutiny that you've just outlined. I reckon that's probably so much worse, isn't it, in a sport that's in everyone's living room.
Yeah, you can go 100 times what scrutiny we get here in rugby league, and all those different opinions end up then, even if it's a 70-30 that the VAR's probably got it right, the 30% make more noise because they think it's wrong. Yeah. So then the rhetoric becomes that it's wrong. So there is a little bit of that, but there are improvements that those guys, and they're working really hard to make them. I know that for a fact.
I think you've just outlined social media there in a nutshell as well. It's the vocal minority. The outraged are the ones you hear. It's not necessarily the majority, and you've got to remember that. You might get one or two absolutely shocking messages, but that's a drop in the ocean. A final point, because I'm conscious of time. I've really enjoyed speaking to you on this episode, so thanks so much for that, Phil. Where do you think we are in terms of the perception of referees? I guess that's the final thing, because when you talk about referees, the conversation is pretty much always the same. It's never a glowing endorsement of referees.
No,
and I use the word, it's an unforgiving profession. So what do you think our perception of referees is, and how do we go about changing that for the positive? And hopefully podcast series like this and the campaign with the RFL and Super League, the Tough Stuff campaign this year, hopefully they help.
Yeah.
What is the perception and how do we change it? I guess is the final one.
It's humanising it a little bit more. So, people understanding, there's a person behind, the Ronseal shirt, there's a bloke there or a girl there that's trying their best to make the decisions. The only reason they're involved in refereeing is because they actually love the sport in the first place. You don't get involved unless you're into rugby league. You're not born a referee. So we need to improve that. And I think one of the ways we can do it is to make sure people understand the way that we interpret the laws and how our policy works. And that's something we're going to do pre-season, is to make sure that people understand, the nuances of the laws and how things work, how the referees interpret certain situations. For instance, for a tackle, I hear crowds booing when the ball carrier is surrendered at the feet of the tackler. Well, they get a lot more time on that tackle, but that creates booing in the crowd because they don't understand, because we've never explained to them. How would they understand that you get more time on a surrender tackle? So they're little things that we can do to better promote the game, but obviously that relies on people watching it. Once we do that kind of media, but hopefully, it's something we can try and see if we can improve the perception a little bit. But ultimately, you want your team to win. That's what it comes down to, Joe. We're all sports fans. You want your team to win, and if the decisions don't go your way and you feel it feels unjust, we're not probably going to change much perception of referees, are we?
That's the magic shirt that Rob Hicks was talking about. We all have a magic shirt we put on, and that's what leads us to do what we do in line with refereeing. Phil, it's been great having you on. I really appreciate it. I think it's been quite a valuable episode. So thank you.
Cheers, George. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
That's Phil Bentham, and thank you for listening to State of Mind Talks.